Hello and welcome everyone today. My name is Tyler Bishop. So just real quick, I want to touch on a couple things. We are recording this. I know a lot of you sign on so that you can just get the recordings. So I will try to kind of keep that in mind. The other thing is I'm going to pull up my full screen here in a minute, and I'm going to go into Google Slides just briefly before we go into the analytics application. Now, one thing to keep in mind is Webinar Ninja has actually had some issues here recently with whenever you go into presentation mode instead of slides, it kicks off the live stream for some reason. They're working on it. It's a really great technology. I like it, but that's a bug that they have. And so if you're wondering why isn't he going full presentation screen inside Google Slides, that's why. So I'm going to go ahead and blow this up now and go over here to Google Slides. Actually, it looks like I've got my own screen pulled up here, so let me just make sure that I can get the slides working here. And let me try it again. And if you guys remember last time we had this problem with the screen sharing, so I'm just trying to circumvent that again. They had promised me this bug had fixed, and I've used this software 3 or 4 times since then and have not had the problems. Even did a test right before I came on air, so a bit frustrating to say the least, but just trying to work on this here. Give me one. So let's try again here. There we go. All right. Okay. And let's see if it's going to let me go full screen. It looks like it is. Okay, great. So we're going to talk today about using big data analytics to grow both traffic and revenue. Thanks for bearing with me there as we get the screen going. Most of you guys know me. I'm Tyler Bishop. I'm an award-winning marketer, the head of marketing for Ezoic. I'm a former successful startup founder. Served as an SEO expert for competition boards and helped hundreds of sites exponentially increase organic traffic. I'm also the co-host of the Publisher Lab, and I'm a Jiu-Jitsu black belt. People often ask, the startup that I started, how did things, like, how is that related to things in the traffic world? It's actually interesting. I got a degree in marketing, and at the time that I did, everybody told me that Google and social media were not effective forms of marketing. Those weren't real marketing. And I disagreed and built an entire business on that. And to this day, I still believe that any business can grow their entire infrastructure on essentially traffic from the internet. And so that's today. Partially what we're going to talk about is how do we get that traffic, and quality traffic translates to revenue. And there's really one theme that I want us to try to get across today. It's a concept that many of you are probably already familiar with, but it's always nice to have a refresher, and it's going to put everything into context today, because I think even if this is a concept that this is going to help you understand it maybe from a clearer picture and help you see the meaningfulness behind some of the data that we're going to talk about. So all that being said, let's imagine for a second that you own a store. Maybe it's sporting goods, maybe it's who knows, but you own this awesome store. Now, let's imagine now that you're trying to increase the profit at your store. So one of the things that you learn is that the most expensive product is a scuba suit. And it's the one with the highest profit. Maybe you earn $70 worth of profit from this scuba suit. Now, You decide now that you're going to invest in even more scuba suits, because here it is, it's your highest, it's your most profitable product that you sell. The more of those you sell, it seems like the more profit you make. So you buy up a whole bunch more scuba suits and you start marketing that. And then next thing you know, the revenue is actually going down. So you're selling more scuba suits. So you're selling more of the highest profiting product inside of your store, but revenue's going down. How is this possible? What happened? Right? This is hard to understand. What we find out is that generally, and this is true in both the e-commerce world as well as it is the publishing world, and although we're going to take a different slant with it in publishing, is when you become so focused on the product and not the customer, you can really lose sight of the journey completely, the buyer journey, as they call it in e-commerce. And so one of the things that we learn when doing this is that it's actually not the most important, it's not the product that matters, it's the visit that matters. So you might learn then, it's not the people that buy the scuba suit that actually produce the greatest profit. It's the customers that come in and spend the most cumulatively. Maybe they don't buy any really high profitable products all at once, but maybe they come in and they buy a fishing pole and they buy all the tackle and all the other elements that go along with fishing. And maybe that results in $140 profit. So customers that spend the most in the fishing department maybe are your most valuable customers, and you're over here looking at the people that are buying scuba suits. So it's not the highest grossing products, but it's the highest grossing total at checkout, or the highest grossing visitor that you're really trying to understand. And so the parallels that this has in the publishing world is that for a long period of time, and I don't mean to get into the weeds here, because for some of you guys, this does not matter very much, these terms, these ideas, but it's really important to understand it from a data perspective as we start to get into the analytics. In this comparison, the products that we're talking about, looking at the most expensive scuba suit, is like looking at CPMs and RPMs, single page revenue or single ad revenue. When we're talking about looking at the customer and their entire visit, we're talking about looking at what we call EPMB. And obviously, if you're an Ezoic user, you are spending a lot of time seeing us reporting on this metric, because this is the revenue that's generated from a single session. The best way that I can describe this is in the form of a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, you have revenue per ad. Those are CPMs. They're all over your page. Every ad has its own CPM. And then you have RPMs, or eCPMs, which is effective CPMs, the total of all the CPMs on the page. So how much is it earning per page? And then at the very bottom, you have per session. How much revenue are you earning per session? And that is giving you the cumulative total of how much you're earning per visitor. That is the end-all, be-all revenue metric. It's going to keep you going in the same direction. So how do we basically handle this now? We're going to start talking about identifying this inside of big data analytics. And one of the reason why I started with that example is because I think one of the most valuable things you can do here inside of big data analytics, you can see I'm logged in here. If you don't know how to get in, all you have to do is go over here, log into Ezoic, go to reporting, and then click on big data analytics. And once you do, it'll pop open in this window. You can see I'm in my kind of test dummy website here, Injury Health Blog. Unfortunately for me, this site in particular doesn't earn a lot of revenue or get a particularly large amount of traffic, but it is a nice kind of test case for us as we start to get into some of this material. So back to my example, if we go down now into content and then landing pages, we're going to actually be able to see which pages on my site are producing the most profitable sessions. So when we start talking about page revenue and RPMs and things along those lines, we're talking about which pages are producing the most amount of revenue, but that's like looking at the product that produces the highest profit. What we really want to see is what the customers are doing that are producing the most revenue. So when we start talking about revenue, one of the things we can do is we can go and look at our landing pages. And then once we're here, so I've got all my pages here. I've only got a short date range here. I'm going to expand this a little bit. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to apply. And I'm going to run this report. Once I've ran my report, I've got the entire month of May here. I've got all my URLs, these different landing pages. And now I'm going to take EPMB, which is at the back here. which is that kind of paramount true north revenue metric we were talking about in the column, and I'm going to drag it. Kind of nice here. You can just sort of drag and drop it. So now I've got it right here, and I'm going to just click the top of this column, and it's going to sort it. And it's going to show me now my highest landing pages by EPMB. So what this is telling me is visitors that come to my site and land on this page, this is how much revenue I'm earning on average per session, or per 1,000 sessions, excuse me. And so why this is invaluable is this is taking into account that they maybe land on this page, but because maybe this page includes links to other pages or leads into other parts of my site through navigation, then maybe you're going on to visit subsequent pages that also load ads that contribute to this total EPMB, or maybe it's just the total engaged time on this page that's contributing to its high revenue. Nevertheless, this gives me a really good idea of what pages are actually producing the most revenue for me. So if I'm looking at this, I have an article here on stem cell therapy for knee, ankle, and shoulder. And I also have an article on SIBO treatment. So both of those things are subjects that are producing a higher EPMB for me. And I can see they're getting 39, 22 visits. So they're getting a number of visits, not a lot. I mean, comparatively for this site, it's fairly high. You can see this article down here is 982. If you want to kind of cut through you can see here, I've got one that's got one visit, or I've got this one here that's got 3 visits. So it may have an artificially inflated EPMB because maybe a lot of visitors haven't come there. So what I can do is I can go to filters, and I only want to include in visits that are greater than, let's say 35. And for most of you, you're going to want a number larger than this. But again, we're dealing with a lower traffic site here. So I'm going to apply this now. And now I'm only going to see the pages that have visits that are more than 35. So now when I sort this, I'm going to get a little bit more relevant of a list, as now I'm not looking at all the pages that maybe just have 1 or 2 page views and maybe don't have accurate EPMB numbers. So I can rest assured on this site that these are probably going to be a little bit more accurate. So if I invest in creating more articles about stem cell therapy or things along those lines, I can be sure that they're probably going to be a higher EPMB type of content in terms of landing pages than, I've got this article down here on treating a finger dislocation. You can see the EPMB is much lower for it. So people that are interested in stem cells, generally are either visiting more pages, more engaged, they're generating more revenue, maybe advertisers are more interested in that content than people as it relates to dislocated fingers. And so quite a bit much so, almost 4 times as much. So that's one of the areas where I really encourage everybody to look. It gives you one of the best ideas around how you can produce content that is going to generate more revenue, because you can look at your existing landing pages and you can write similar content to your highest earning content. And then you can also maybe even go back. I can look at this finger dislocation guide. I can also see over here that my engaged page views per visit is 8.0 here, and my average is 0.83. So it's just below average in terms of engaged page views per visit. So I might want to take a look at that as well and figure out what can I do to maybe coax my users to visiting other pages. So that's landing pages. That's one of the best and fastest ways for you to understand which of your content is actually producing the most valuable sessions, and one of the fastest ways to generate more revenue. So now, one of the other things, since we're talking about revenue, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to dig into something that I think is actually pretty neat here. We're going to go into revenue up here at the top, and then I'm going to go to revenue versus last year. So when I look at revenue versus last year, again, guys, I apologize, it's a small site, but you can see my revenue is up over against last year. It gives me a good idea of maybe how seasonality is affected. I might think that my revenue is down in May versus April, but when I expand that out, I may actually see that year over year, maybe generally always revenue is a bit down in May, but my revenue overall is up. Seeing your overall total revenue and being able to compare it year over year really does give you a great barometer of whether or not you're making more money. It sounds kind of not counterintuitive. It sounds very intuitive, actually. But this is something that's really important, I think, for publishers to identify, because throughout the history of online advertising, partners and monetization folks in the space, I'll just kind of leave it at that, have always manipulated publishers with CPMs and RPMs. They'll tell them, I'm going to give you a really high CPM, you're going to see really high RPMs, but those metrics will not tell you whether or not you're actually making more money or not. EPMD will. It will tell you if you're making more money per visitor, but then you always want to be comparing your revenue year over year to be able to make sure that if there are seasonal trends, if you are getting higher CPMs or RPMs, are those things good? Is it contributing to higher total revenue? So now we're going to look at a couple other things inside of here. What's kind of neat is I can start to see automatically here, my visits are up 651%, page views up 733%. These are really high. But I can also start to see revenue. My revenue compared to my visits. Again, let's drag this over here. The benefits of drag and drop. This is something I encourage people to come and take a look at year over year, and that is my visits in this case are up 651%. My revenue is up 757%. What does that tell me? It means that relative to my visits, my revenue is up even higher. And if we look at my EPMV, we can see exactly why. My EPMV is up 14.16%. So what's nice about knowing this is that when we see this, all these things make sense. They add up. My visits are up, my revenue is up even more, and my revenue per visitor is up as well. And so that correlates to the difference between the higher revenue than the visits. This is information that you should know. This is the information that keeps you from being taken advantage of as a publisher as it relates to your revenue. And that's why this is one of the very simple, easy reports that you can start to pull inside of big data analytics. So if we go down now, I'm going to go into behavior. And I'm going to go to maybe I'm going to content. Let's see. Yes, I'm going to content. Sorry. Content and then pages without revenue. So when I go to content and then pages without revenue, I get a list of pages here that aren't earning any revenue. So this is really important if you're an Ezoic user. So I don't have a good example here. So if I look at these pages here, these are my date range pages on injury health blogs. So if we go to these, we're going to see really quickly why there's no revenue on these pages is there's not really any content. So this is it's just the dates. And actually I can see there are some ads on here, but I don't think people are actually going to these pages, and that's probably why they're not earning any revenue. So you can see this, all this is telling them is this is a page that shows all the articles that were written in the month of December here. And so I can see inside of big data analytics that these pages are not really earning any revenue. I drag my revenue over here and I can see that those things are all at zero. What you want to do with something like this is go through it, and then if you have pages, and like for example, this right here, I look at this and I say 454 page views and not a dime in revenue. What's going on? Well, when I look at this page, it's actually just an image. It's an image that people click on inside of my site. Number one, it tells me maybe I should make this image something that people can't click on. You can see here, it's just a big old fat image file. So it makes sense. You can't show any ads here. So maybe I want to make that something that people can't click on because 454 people have clicked on it in the month of May. But let's pretend for a second that this was a normal URL on my site and it's not getting any revenue. What I'm going to want to do is figure out why I'm not being able to generate any revenue on that page. And one of the most common reasons why is if we go inside of monitoring now, inside of Ezoic, there's an area here called objectionable content. And so one of the things Ezoic does for publishers is to prevent you from getting banned by Google or violating Google policy if you have objectionable content on your site that Google is going to give you warnings about or potentially just ban you outright for having. What we will do is we will help you see, you can set any date range you want. If there's any pages on your site that we are not displaying ads on because of objectionable content. And this is so that you don't get any penalties or infringe on Google policy at all. This is a protection for you. And so what this can do is you can go in here if you see lowered revenue or pages without revenue, you can go in here, check your objectionable content, and you can find out, hey, do I have some pages here that I need to clean up so that, actually, I think I have a web, inside one of my other sites, my jiu-jitsu website, I talked about steroids, I believe, once in jiu-jitsu, and I believe steroids is flagged as objectionable content. Yep, there you are. PEDs in jiu-jitsu, steroids is getting this thing flagged. I could potentially go in and then modify this article to eliminate this. And if I have additional issues with this, I could also reach out to the Ezoic team and potentially ask for their assistance with handling this if I'm experiencing this in a pretty massive way where a lot of my pages are affected and maybe have some type of turnover problem. So going back into big data analytics now, pages without revenue, it's a really good place to start. You want to know if you've got an area of your site that's not earning revenue. So now let's go to behavior. Now we're going to behavior, and we'll go to navigation bounces. So some of you have heard me kind of pound the drum on this before. Navigation bounces are directly correlated with SEO and revenue. And what I mean by that is high navigation bounces show a correlation to lower paid GPMVs and a loss of organic keywords. And the reason being is navigation bounce, for you guys that haven't heard me talk about it ad nauseum, and I promise I'm going to show some new stuff here. Navigation bounces are essentially an internal bounce when somebody goes to a page very quickly and then comes back to another page. So a good example of that might be I'm on this page, I click this article, as soon as it loads, I hit the back button and come right back to this page. So immediately press back, and that's considered a navigation bounce. So why this affects revenue is because that page, when I visit it just briefly, loaded ads. And the downside of that is that when you load ads on a page really quickly and the user goes away, the viewability, the click-through rate, all that kind of stuff is going to be negatively impacted over time. So if you're producing a lot of page views with low click-through rates, low visibility, viewability, and people aren't actually interacting with that advertiser's ads or going to their sites and things along those lines, over the long term, advertisers will see that and they bid historically based on ad inventory, and they'll lower their bids for that inventory over time in the real-time bidding protocol. And so that's why navigation bounces have a correlation to revenue. And for SEO, Google is also measuring this. They're measuring their own equivalency of things like engagement time. And when they're seeing page views that are producing very low engagement time or no engagement time at all, that's a negative signal. And so I'm looking here at my navigation bounces. I can come over here and I can pull my navigation bounce rate, and I can see this by page. So I can sort now, and I can see so now I'm on my jiu-jitsu website. I've got that pulled in here, and I can see that I've got navigation bounces on 50% of my traffic for this page. So it would be worth my time to go and check that out. Unfortunately, there's only 2 page views here. So this is another example where I might want to go in here and filter and say, I only want to include page views that I've had at least 10 or more. It's going to give me a better idea. So I can see here for people that have visited the page more than 10 times, I do have one page here that seems like it has a high amount of navigation bounces. So I might want to go and check out that page and figure out what's going on, because I can also see that my average engage time is much lower on this than most of my others. And I can also see that the bounce rate is extremely high. So this is a page that I should probably give some TLC to, because its page stats are pretty bad. And this is a good article. I remember writing it, and it's keyword optimized for a couple interesting keywords. So it would behoove me to go and check this out even further. And then last, I'm going to go into user experience here, and we're going to kind of go down the list here. I'm going to start by looking at device type. So you might think this is not something that's all that interesting or important. And I see him getting some questions in the chat. I will get to all those here in just a minute. I promise. I'm going through just a couple of these things here, and then this is the last thing that I've got, and then I'll answer any questions that you guys have about looking at some of this data. So if we go to user experience and then by device type, what I can start to see here is I can see how people are engaging by device with my site. So I can start to go over here to average engagement time, and I can see basically that people on tablets are engaging far less than people on desktop or phone. You can see phone and desktop are actually really similar. I might want to then make sure that whenever I go and I pull in pages of my site, that I can then go to inspect, and then usually I should be getting, and there we go. I can come over here and I can select iPad, and I can make sure that my site is, I'm going to reload it now. I can make sure that my site is displaying properly in tablet. So this seems kind of like, oh, why would I do this? The whole point of this is when you look at this by device type and you're able to see, okay, these are my engaged page views by device type. Okay, well, I just have more page views in general by phone and by desktop. Well, that's nice, but why is my engaged time per visit for tablet so much lower? It would work out really great for me to make sure that whenever I write articles that my site is displaying in tablet the way that I would imagine it would. So this is really good, especially if you write a lot, if you find out that the majority of your traffic is coming through a mobile phone, which a lot of us do, but most of us, work on a desktop device. And so it would make a lot of sense that whenever you write an article that you would go and look at it on your most popular device and things like that. And if it's not something you regularly do, you may want to get into big data analytics and just make sure that you don't have a big discrepancy here. I need to probably look at a lot of my pages as it relates to tablet to make sure there's not something going on here. Now, if we go to page by UX, this is really interesting because what I want to look at here is I want to start to see my engaged time, and let's also look at engagement rate. And I'm going to throw a filter in here. I only want to see whenever the averaging, I only want to see ones where the page views are greater than, let's say 10. Again, I want to get rid of all the one page view pieces of data here. And then when I sort here, I'm looking at, I can sort by my average engagement time, and I can see that this article that I wrote on a jiu-jitsu tournament called Metamoris was by far my most engaging article. Now, this is really interesting because this particular topic has a lot of spin-off topics. And I could write a lot more about this, but I never have, because to be quite honest, I wasn't sure that people were engaging with that article much more than they were engaging with this one that I wrote about tearing my ACL, or this one here about reviewing a certain type of jiu-jitsu kimono, or this one here about this gentleman here that's a jiu-jitsu competitor. But you can see here that nothing holds a candle to the way that people are engaging with this content right here. So this can give me a really good idea of maybe what types of content I want to create next, because I can see that not only is it producing my most engagement time, my engagement rate is 77% here. My engaged page views is higher. My average page duration is very high. The bounce rate is very low. This is great content here. This tells me this is one of my best pages, and I may want to look into producing more content like this. And then very last is looking at UX by traffic source. So again, we're going to add some filters here. I want to only include visits that are greater than, let's say, 30. Again, low traffic site, so you guys are going to want larger numbers in this. So I can see here by different traffic sources. In the case of this site, I'm actually going to switch back to injury health here. Actually, let's just look at all my sites together here, Bishop, BJJ, and Injury Health. You can do this if you have multiple sites using Ezoic. You can look at all your data together. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to add my filter in, greater than. 30. Apply this. So now I can see here, these are some of the different referrers of my traffic. So I can see Google here, and I can just see my average engagement time by different traffic sources. So I can see here that Bing is actually outperforming Google. I'm not sure that that gives me something that's all that actionable, but I can see here that my Pinterest traffic is not very good. It's not very high quality. So I may be investing a lot of time in my Pinterest traffic, but it's not producing very much on the back end. They're not very engaged in my content. I may want to start to use this information. You can see here my refers from Quora. They're extremely engaged. I may want to invest more time in answering questions on Quora because the people that come to my site from there, they're super engaged. Look, my average engagement time is 157. My Quora visitors are 2 minutes and 49 seconds. I answer a lot of questions on there. I think it's a great way to get traffic to my site. And so this is telling me that I should spend more time answering questions here and driving traffic to my site because these visitors really dig my content. Not only are they engaged and those have correlations to revenue and SEO and all those types of things, but those visitors, my return visitor rate is pretty good here, 10%. I wish I knew what my unknown was here. That's because of HTTPS, but unknown, they're coming back at a really high rate. I wish I knew who those people were. You can see my Google visitors, the return visitor rate's pretty high there. My return visitor rate from Google in Australia is even higher than that. So you can get a pretty good idea here of a lot of different things that would be really interesting, I think, in how you pursue different traffic forms, whether it's organic or you leverage other mechanisms. But most of you guys will have a lot more referrers than me, and it may give you a good idea of what types of relationships you want to invest in the most, whether you do guest blogging, answer questions on Quora or Reddit, and a lot of other areas like that. But this will give you a good idea of where the quality traffic is coming from, which is, I think, one of the things we want to invest in if we're worried about things like SEO and revenue. So that's the tour. I'm going to hop back over here. I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen. There we go. All right, so let's see what questions we have for you guys. Amanda, how come advertisers bid CPM style? That's just how advertising has been done forever. It's a really easy way to buy advertisements. I buy CPM style all the time. You basically have two choices. You can pay per impression, because if you're an advertiser, it's really the only thing you can bid on. I can pay per impression or I can pay per click. And impressions are me gambling that whatever I'm putting out there is attractive enough to my potential audience that I either don't need them to click. You can think of sometimes banner ads are not even there to be clicked on. They're there so that the brand has brand recognition. And then also you may think that, you may, by paying per 1,000 impressions, you can probably get more clicks and get a better deal that way than paying per click if you have really engaging ads or something along those lines. But it's been that way for over a century. Is there any way to discover CPMs to sell direct at a competitive rate? No. And then let's see. The page is not earning revenue section is useful. Thanks, Janet. Gwen says, Tyler, are you saying that navigation bounces on one page could affect an advertiser's interest in placing ads on your site overall? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I have a great blog on this. If you go to blog.ezoic.com and you type in removing ads, I wrote an article about why sometimes when publishers, we've done a lot of experiments with this here at Ezoic. It's really what we're good at. It's what the entire machine is built to do. But we've done studies in that what we're able to show is that sometimes when ads are removed, the overall bidding price for advertisers goes up because it's kind of like supply and demand. Now, one of the things you learn about is that supply has a value, and navigation bounces produce low quality page views where they go real quick and then come back. That page that they landed on very quickly and then leave, that page produces very low quality inventory for advertisers. Now, that happens once, it's no big deal, but it happens a lot over time, especially if it hadn't been happening before. And what's going to happen is advertisers are going to see inside of a real-time bidding protocol, and it's not like they're going through one by one. This is all happening automated. And what's happening is they're seeing that inventory isn't worth as much because the viewability is low, the click-through rate's low, campaign performance is low. If it's low enough, they may just blacklist and say, I don't want to buy anything on this site because all the traffic is garbage for me. And so what you want to do is make sure that those navigation bounces aren't contributing to lower quality page views, because what's going to happen is that's going to negatively impact your ad revenue over time. And so this is where machine learning is really helpful, because what you learn is that this stuff doesn't happen instantly. So if I get a bunch of navigation bounces today, tomorrow I'm not going to make less revenue. I might make more because of the page. I might be producing more page views, loading more ads. But what we learn is that over time, this produces lower revenue. And what we've seen in case studies examples are that a lot of times publishers want to sell technology like infinite scroll, where you scroll to the bottom of the page and it loads another page, or where you swipe, it immediately takes you to another article, kind of like how AMP does in Google. And while that's some pretty nice functionality and page views per visit does go up, over time what you see is revenue goes down with this. There's a lot of technologies out there that leverage this kind of stuff, and it looks real nice on a mobile device. But the problem is users don't necessarily want to swipe, or when they reach the bottom of the article, load other pages. And so they very quickly swipe back, or they scroll back up. And what happens is you're getting navigation bounces in mobile navigation, and you don't even know it. And that's one of the reasons why you want to monitor it, especially if you have some of those functionalities on mobile. And Tim, when you're talking about that a little bit, Amanda says, one of our most popular articles has a high bounce rate, but it also has a slideshow that counts as new pages. How does that engagement take that into consideration? This is a good example of what I was just talking about. So slideshows are, I'm not saying that slideshows are bad, but think about it this way. If slideshows are producing very low average engagement time per page view, and I'm assuming these are separate URLs whenever you go through the slideshow, and it's loading new ads every time. If that is the case, let me know. If it is not the case, let me know. But if it is loading new URLs each time, that is going to potentially drive down the cost of your ad rates over time. Because what's going to happen is they're going to, when users click through a slideshow really quickly, look at the images, see very little content, click to something else, those page views are not overly valuable to an advertiser. If you think about it, if I'm Coca-Cola and I'm trying to buy really good quality inventory where users are engaged in the content, I'm probably not going to get my ads seen as much, clicked on as much, or engaged with as much on those slideshow page views as I am a long form article where they're going through and they're very, very engaged in the content. And so slideshows are tricky, but it's one of the reasons why we provide all these different engagement metrics, so publishers can measure all these things together on their sites. Because some sites can definitely do the slideshow thing, and it's one of the best ways for them to engage with their audience. But if the whole point of a slideshow is just to get people to visit more pages so you can make more money, we've shown over time that actually it can have the opposite effect. Janet asked, what's a good average engagement time? It's really hard. It's a question I get all the time. People want to know what's a good bounce rate, what's a good average engagement time. It's like asking what a good car is, or what a good vehicle is to drive. It really depends. Maybe it's a pickup truck, maybe it's a car. It really depends on your website. My good friend Tim here, he has a site that's a sort of a do-it-yourself, or learn how to do a lot of things at home, where people are basically coming to a site to look for an answer on how to do something. He's probably going to have a very different average engagement time than somebody that has a breaking news type of website where people are coming there and they're maybe just reading about some breaking news quickly, or something along those lines. But I guess my point is everybody's going to be very different there. So it's not really something where you should be worried about any particular number. I don't ever want to give people that impression. What you need to be concerned about is drops. You want to see inconsistencies between pages. You want to compare pages to your site averages. And then you also want to do things that you think you can do to potentially increase those metrics. So looking at them over time, what things do you do that improve engagement time, and what things do you potentially do that harm it? Amanda says, if Australia is highly engaged, do you recommend making content specific to that country? It is one of those things where this is the type of stuff that we want to pull out of that data is who is engaged. Is that an audience? If that's a high volume audience, you're getting a lot of people from Australia to your site and they seem to be really engaged, it would seem like that's kind of an untapped pocket of potential visitors that you could tap into, especially if they're really engaged, that you could potentially work on SEO a little bit that way. But for the most part, I would say that that's probably a high revenue earning audience that you can go out and capture. So yeah, maybe it is worth writing a little bit more content specific to that country. Gwen says, thanks for the clarification. Should I stop? Thanks for the clarification. I use some tier 2 pages as expanded menus for subtopics. They are basically designed for high navigation balances. Should I stop doing this? Should I make sure all my pages are designed to make readers get engaged for a while? The answer basically is yes. And I say basically meaning that any pages that show ads, any page views that you plan on producing that show ads, you should try to make sure that you have good engagement time, or at least a good engagement rate. If you have high navigation bounces and a low engagement rate on a certain page, that page's ads are going to have very low ad rates over time. Now, you may say, well, I'm not as worried about that. On average, the sites that get the most traffic, engagement's fine. The only concern that I would have is if those navigation bounces and things like that are producing a higher volume of low quality page views, what you're going to have a problem with is advertisers potentially blacklisting your inventory in the future. Them seeing that there's a lot of page views that they put their ads on that are getting very low viewability, click-through rate, and then advertisers going in and blacklisting you. And what that does is reduces the competition inside of the real-time bidding protocol for your inventory. As we all know, competition is a good thing. Competition drives up ad rates. So it would be something I took a close look at. I'm not able to really glean from your question exactly what's happening on the page, but if you're able to measure high navigation balances and low page engagement rate, so seeing how often engagement time is accrued, which is 15 seconds of engagement time, those are good metrics to look at on those pages to figure out if it's potentially an issue. When it says I should explain the potential costs, I'm trying to balance the negatives against costs, making it harder for my readers to dig into my site and look things up. So another way to deal with this problem would be to keep ads off the pages that I intend to use as high navigation balance pages. Yes, potentially so. That is one solution if it's a core makeup of your site and you want to ensure that your ad rates aren't affected by basically having some kind of transitional page view or something like that. Yeah, not showing ads on those pages may be a way to prevent advertisers from blacklisting you or potentially harming your overall site ad rates. Amanda says she has an article that is not earning revenue. Would you recommend us trying to fix it or drop it altogether since it's a bit edgy? It just depends. So if there's objectionable content on it, which I'm reading kind of just the URL aspects of it, it might be. It's up to you. From the standpoint of it may get a lot of traffic that is then referring to other pages which are producing revenue, in which case any kind of modification could potentially harm the SEO of the article, and then you might end up losing the traffic that you were getting from that page that was producing revenue. You could maybe look at your landing page EPMB and just see how it's doing from a landing page standpoint. But for the most part, I would say if you feel like you could get that page to where it doesn't have objectionable content on it, it's probably certain words that are triggering it, which inside of the objectionable content filter, you'll be able to see that. It might be worth modifying it so that page can earn some revenue, especially if it's getting a decent amount of traffic. So Gwen says, I have another question related to the last webinar. The Google structured data markup tool, will it get me into trouble with Google if I don't submit the entire text for an article? So this is a good question. So basically, structured data, the rich snippets that show up in search results, you can mark up all your content. You can use WordPress plugins for this. Google has a tool for it, and basically allows you to tell Google the author of the page, where images are and things like that, so that it can display it in a rich form inside of the SERP or the search engine results page. So Gwen is asking, basically, if you basically leave parts of that incomplete. So there's all these different categories that they want you to fill in. They can potentially use for rich data markup. If whenever you're using a plugin or Google's tools, if you leave areas of those categories blank, will it get you in trouble or will it cause an error? The answer is no. Google will take whatever you give it. It's kind of like a meta description. If you give them one, they'll take it. If not, they may just make one up. With the schema.org markup, basically what they're going to do is they're going to take whatever you give them. The Google tool is going to tell you there's errors and things along those lines. But my screen just went black. I don't know about you guys, but my monitoring screen here, I don't know if you guys can still hear me or not. Yeah, so the answer is you're fine there. Don't worry too much about the errors. Let's see. Amanda has another question about a landing page. She asked if I would recommend moving into Longform. I don't know. I can't look at it. I would take a close look at the stats that we talked about earlier. The engagement time per page, the engagement rate. If all those things are low, it's telling you about your users. One of the things that I can't stress enough is that focus on your users. One of the things we've learned over time here at Ezoic is that when you focus on your visitors, all those other things, SEO, traffic, revenue, all those other things follow. And so you should be able to see by looking at that landing page and all the different engagement stats related to the other pages that they go to from there, whether or not they're having good experiences or bad ones. And good experiences are going to always translate to higher revenue, and bad experiences are over time going to usually contribute to lower ad rates and a lot of other bad things eventually. So Amanda wants to know where the objectionable content filter is. You go to monitoring. You just click on monitoring up here. I need to log in as an individual site. And then I go to objectionable content. And it'll not only give you the URL, but it'll tell you the words. And if this is something you've never looked at before, Amanda, I will say I know that you have a site about college kids and college life in general. And you probably have some URLs that are in there just by the very nature of those topics and subjects. So it might be worth taking a close look at that filter. Good, I'm glad you see it's actually a navy blue t-shirt, Tim, but thanks for noticing. Good. Good, I'm glad that helped, Amanda. And Gwen says, could you please comment on the cost and benefits of image size? I understand they need to keep files small, but they're too small, they won't be attractive in social media. Pinterest, right? Sometimes Facebook won't even include an image with my post because the images aren't big enough. So you can usually inside of articles, you can, for social media specifically, so I don't know if you're using WordPress. If you're using WordPress, if you get Yoast, what you can do is you can actually, the preview images that are used for social media, you can create an entirely separate image that you deliver just to social media sites. They use this like a thumbnail preview, and you can make it any size you like. As it relates to image size, there's no reason for images to really be more than 1,000 pixels for just about anybody. And so I always kind of use that as my top end, and then I compress it from there. And usually images that are 1,000 pixels wide and then compressed using Optimizilla or Photoshop, they're usually under 100 kilobytes. So that's usually those are kind of like my set numbers for that. That's just my personal thing, but I find that that's a good point of reference for everybody. Amanda says, how do you suggest fixing GIFs that are slowing? I'm sorry if you call them GIFs, I call them GIFs. How do you suggest fixing GIFs that are slowing down the page in waterfall results? That's a hard question. GIFs are a little slower in general. There are some GIF compression, free GIF compression image solutions out there. So if you just search GIF compression, you can find some. The only problem is I've seen some of them, they break them, and then sometimes they degrade the quality a little bit. It's a problem we all have. I like to use them a lot in blogs, but then what I find is that a lot of our European visitors and things like that have trouble with them. just because it causes the page to load slower. So I try to be really judicious with my use of them on my site, that specifically on pages where I think I'm going to be concerned about speed. Okay, Gwen says she's not on WordPress. There may be ways, I'm not 100% aware, but there are ways that you can code something in your site that says you want Facebook, social media sites to basically grab a separate image that you have stored someplace as the thumbnail for a post, because I do this quite a bit, but I do use WordPress to do it. So it is possible you can grab another image that they use as a preview, but if you want to, if you're worried about sizes and things like that, 1,000 pixels wide is always a good base. Using that is a scalable solution, I think, works for the most part, especially when you compress them usually under 100 kilobytes. All right, and that looks like the majority of questions are answered, so I'm happy with that. You guys will get a recording of this webinar if you want to dig into it. I do encourage you to just get around and dig into big data analytics. One of the things I'm playing with is I'm thinking about coming up with a contest for all of our users where I basically want you guys to dig into your own big data analytics and find stuff that is significant. And I'm thinking about giving away a large cash prize to whoever finds the most significant piece of data inside of the big data analytics. So we're always looking for correlations, our data scientists team are, but I'm really interested in some of the kind of very revealing or counterintuitive things that you might find. So we're thinking about a contest like this, and so yeah, just maybe get into the big data analytics and get a head start. So I think that's it today, guys. Thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to chatting again with you soon.